It's time to get in the game.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Get in the Game podcast, the podcast where we explore ways to get off the sidelines, stop making excuses, and get in the game. I'm your coach, Trevor Dean, and I hope everyone's having a great week and that today's message, today's topic reaches you well. I say it, or I have said it at the last few episodes at the end, that I'm praying for you and I love you guys. Again, I encourage you to reach out to us either through our social media handles at Get in the Game PC or through our email at getinthegamepodcast@gmail.com, and just reach out if you have any prayer requests, praises, things you'd like to talk about, things you'd like me to talk about. I'd love to interact with you guys there as well. So without further ado, let's get into today's topic, and I'm just titling it Ready, or more appropriately, Ready? So with a question mark at the end of it. I'm going to ask you a few questions, and just wherever you are right now, if you're in your car, at home, at work, listening to this or watching this, just kind of reflect on these questions and answer them to yourself honestly. First off is, do you like to compete? Do you like to try and do better than what you were before, or maybe someone else you're going against? You always like that challenge of pushing yourself and doing your best. Second question, do you give your best in everything that you do? So to kind of, go into a little more depth of it, how are you motivated? Are you motivated through competition? You always need someone else pushing you, or are you internally motivated? Do you have something that when you wake up in the morning, you just go and get after it? To be honest with me, I struggle with this a little bit. I'm not always internally motivated, and it's kind of goes subject to subject, or different, instance to instance, or walk of life to walk of life. If it comes to athletics, or the way I used to be in athletics and coaching, I was very internally motivated. But when it comes to other things, let's say like now that I'm older and I'm more out of shape, sometimes I need more of a push, a competition in my life to motivate me. So, but when you're there, do you give your best in everything you do? Because I feel like when we give our best in everything, we have to have some sort of personal motivation. It can't always be an outside source of motivation. So, do you give your best in everything you do? Third question, do you prefer to win, lose, or tie? And you might be wondering, like, what do you mean tie? And this doesn't have to be athletically at all. This could be in anything. This could be in leisure, in recreation, in hobby, in life, in work, or in competition. Do you prefer to win? Would you rather lose, or would you rather tie? For me, obviously, I love to win, but I hate to lose. And I used to tell my athletes this: I hate losing more than I love winning. And that's because losing, those big losses, which I've had in my career as coaching and playing, and I've had big wins in both those as well, the losses stick around longer. I may have mentioned it in one of my first episodes, but there are matches when I was a player that still haunt me today, as even no longer even as a coach or an actual coach on a specific program, that I played and that I wish I could go back and change. They are losses that shaped the way I coached moving forward. And if you see in athletics today, in pro sports, sometimes a franchise will make a shift, especially like in a sport like football or something, when they lose a big game. Let's say they got to the Super Bowl and they lost, and it was devastating to that city, to that team, to everyone around it. And that's all they can dwell on the whole next year, is that they were this close to winning. But no one ever talks about that the team that won, they celebrated, they did their parade and all that stuff, and then they moved on. Their celebration lasts so little, and the destruction that huge loss brings just sticks around for even longer. And so franchises have literally changed the way that they've gone about, the way they coach, the way that they compete and stuff, because of huge losses. And so, do you prefer to win, lose, or tie? There are in major sports like soccer or football, not American football, you have a draw. You can tie in regular season, and same with hockey. You can tie, and so sometimes those are devastating as well, especially if you feel like you played well or you were leading up to the very end, and all of a sudden the other team brought it, to equal. And so, what do you prefer when it comes to competition, or comes to life, or comes to work? Fourth question: are you satisfied with just being on the winning team or group, or do you have a drive to be an integral member of that group? So to clarify, it's kind of like, the bigger the role and more responsibility, the bigger the reward later. Or are you just satisfied with being on that team? Are you satisfied with just being a member, never getting into the actual game, never really playing a big part, and walking away with that championship ring at the end, saying, "Hey, I was part of it," but no one ever would say that you had anything to do with that win or anything like that? Or do you compete to get in, to have a bigger part, to make an impact on that team or group, whether it is seen on the field, court, boardroom, whatever, or if it's just felt within the team? As an athlete early on in my career, I knew that coming into high school, I was one of the taller people as a freshman, and then I stopped growing as a freshman, and so everyone kind of outgrew me. And then the sport I played, volleyball, when you're outgrown, you're usually kind of put into positions where you're not in what you would normally consider the shiny positions, or the ones that get a lot of the praise and accolades, or the even respect from other teams. I played more of a defensive role, even though I had skills offensively as well. But I knew from the effort I gave and the leadership I tried to give, and the role I played of being just a great teammate, that those matches that I didn't always get a chance to play a big role in, I know that I made an impact during practice that week, or an impact during the game, keeping spirits up, or coming in when I had just a few opportunities to actually do my job and make an impact. So I can walk away from those games knowing inside that I had that impact. I did do something. And I'm okay with that, because I played to the best of my ability. And that's all we can do in terms of whatever walk of life we're talking about. But there are other people, and I've coached these type of players. I've been on teams with these type of players who are just happy with being there. And if they never get into the competition, they're okay. They just want to be part of the team. They just want to be a chance to go and hang out with friends for 2.5 hours every day after school, and get some exercise in, be around a sport that they enjoy, but they have no real motivation to make a huge impact. And it's one of those things. I'm asking you, is that you? Is that something that you can relate to, or are you more on the I want to be part of that integral? I want to make an impact, be an integral player on this team, on this group, and lead, follow, right, whatever it may be. Just you're giving the best of your ability knowing when you walk away from it, there's nothing more you could have given. The last question I have for you today is, if the game were to end right now, would the way that you're quote unquote playing be everything you'd hoped it would be? And I asked that question because the title of today's episode is Ready? And for all of us, whether we're believers in Jesus or not, one day we're all going to meet him and be judged for the life we all live here on earth. And so I ask all these other questions because the way we live our lives as Christians, and non-Christians, for those of you who are listening who might not have a faith in Jesus, we're all going to be judged one day. We're all going to stand before God, and Jesus is either going to say that he knows us because we have that relationship with him, or he's going to say that I don't know this person. And then that means that we don't get to spend eternity with him in heaven. We go to hell. And I say we collectively, that's not me. I have that faith in Jesus. I'm going to heaven. I know it in my heart. I have that relationship with him. But those are the only two ways. It's either heaven, and that's not even the goal. The goal is Jesus. We just get to spend time with him in eternity in heaven. Or for those of us who didn't make that decision to follow Jesus, to have that relationship, to put our life in his hands, the other alternative is hell. And that might not sit well with some of you, but that's the truth. And I've told you before, I'm going to be truthful with you. Jesus is coming again. And for some of us, or for some people, when people talk about the second coming of Jesus, it is it's going to be a physical dissension from heaven. I've mentioned before, after his death, burial, and resurrection, he ascended into heaven. And the scripture says that he will return in the same way that he ascended. And that's when he will call all his believers home with him who are here, alive on earth at that time. And so we're either going to be united with Jesus at that point, or we're going to be united with Jesus in a physical death here on earth before that second coming. So that judgment that I'm talking about, that's at those times, that's what's going to happen. Those are those moments where we're going to have to sit before Jesus and say, this is what we have. This is what we did with our life. This is what we did with your name. And based off of our life here and our decision to either follow Jesus or not follow Jesus, to believe in him or to not believe in him, that's going to determine our eternal fate. And so in Matthew, Jesus is talking, and he's telling those who he's talking to be ready for his coming. So after his death, to be ready for it. And in Matthew 24, verse 42, he says, "Therefore, be on alert, for you do not know which day your Lord is coming." And so I mentioned it after I asked those questions, or the last question. If the game were to end right now, is the way you're playing be everything that you hoped it would be? In this instance, if Jesus were to come back right now, what you're doing, the way you're living, the unconfessed sin, that sort of stuff, would you be proud? Would you be glorifying God in what you're doing, or would you be caught in something you shouldn't be doing? Are you glorifying him, or are you doing something that you would be ashamed of if he were to come back today? And that could be any time. So are you ready? If he came back today, what would you be doing? Are we so caught up in earthly things and stresses of this world, or are we doing our best to take what he has given us, these gifts he's given us, and glorifying him by sharing it with other people? Would you be ready, or would you be ashamed? In Revelation 22:12, there's another passage where Jesus is talking, and he says, "Behold, I am coming quickly, and my reward is with me, to render to every man according to what he has done." That makes reference to the question I asked before. Are you satisfied with just being on the winning team, or do you want a bigger slice of the pie? Do you want a bigger role in what Jesus has given you for this life? The bigger the role and responsibility, the bigger the reward. So the more we do for him, the more the reward he's going to give us in eternity. And that doesn't, don't get me wrong, our works do not save us. The only way we're saved is through our faith in Jesus Christ. The only way that we can get to heaven is by putting our trust and faith and life in Jesus Christ, knowing he is, and I'll say it again, the Son of God. He came of a virgin. He lived a perfect life. He died on the cross for our sins. He was killed. He was dead, buried, and he came back to life. He was resurrected, and he's still alive today. If you believe those things, that's what will save you. But our works is what shows the kind of faith that we have. The just miraculous life of Jesus and the relationship that we have with him. If we love him the way that we say we do, then our life and works will reflect that. And so when people kind of quote that verse, faith without works is dead, it just means that your faith is just kind of worthless if you aren't living it. Last week's episode was love out your faith. If you're not loving out your faith, if you're not doing anything in your life that shows that you are a believer in God, you might not be a believer in Jesus Christ. Doesn't mean you aren't. So don't get me wrong. Don't go out there and say, "Oh, Trevor said that I don't believe in God because I don't, my works aren't great." No, that's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is we need to reflect on what Jesus did for us and what are we doing for others. What are we doing for him? How are we glorifying him in our life? Just to say we believe it and then go on living our lives like the rest of the world is not going to cut it. Jesus is transforming. He takes our lives and he molds it, and he shapes our life to be a living sacrifice for him. And if we aren't a living sacrifice for Jesus, and this is something I struggle with day in and day out, but like I've said before, I'm a work in progress, just like we all are. If we're not doing our best to be our best for him, and there's not something internally telling you that, man, I got to be better, then I'm praying for you. I'm praying for anyone who's struggling with that, because it's not a good spot to be in. We have to strive to be everything we can for God, for Jesus, for the kingdom of God. Our life has to reflect the faith that we claim to have. And not to prove that we are a Christian, but because we love him so much and because he loves us so much that we're just obedient and living our life out for him. Another verse, just because I want to back this stuff up with Scripture, because Scripture is truth. God is truth. 1 Thessalonians 5, verses 1 through 3. And there's a part in this where you may have heard before. It's has kind of I would say more of a famous little snippet of it. And there's more to it to that though. But so I want to get to it. It just kind of plays off that same theme that Jesus is coming quick, and we don't know when it's going to be. So in chapter 5 of 1 Thessalonians, verses 1 through 3, it says, "Now, as to the times and the epochs, brethren, you have no need of anything to be written to you. For you yourselves know full well that the day of the Lord will come just like a thief in the night." That's that famous phrase, come like a thief in the night. Verse 3 picks up, "While they are saying peace and safety, then destruction will come upon them suddenly like labor pains upon a woman with child, and they will not escape." And I'm going to unpack this a little bit, but it says right there in verse 2 that the day of the Lord will come just like a thief in the night. And the image I get on that is basically we're sleeping, we're at peace, we think everything's fine, and all of a sudden someone breaks into your home. And actually in verse 6 below that it says, "So then let us not sleep as others do, but let us be alert and sober." It's basically just knowing that we're not going to be asleep. We're not going to just let things kind of just ride easy and not worry about others, not worry about our faith and living it out. We're actually going to be alert. We need to be awaiting, like ready for the time that Jesus comes back, and of sober mind. In verse 3, at the end of that, it says, "The destruction will come upon them suddenly like labor pains upon a woman with child, and they will not escape." And there's going to be a time when Jesus comes back where the world is going to be wanting more time. They won't be ready for his return. It says that the pain will come, or the destruction will come like pain to a woman in childbirth. That is, obviously, I've never been in that situation, but we all know that there's a lot of pain associated with that childbirth, and it comes on you in an instant. We have no idea sometimes. With modern science, we can induce labor a little bit more, so we're kind of more ready for it. But those people who, those women who just decide to have natural childbirth, or even if you decide to have it induced, we all know that there are times where labor could just kick in at a moment's notice, and you have no idea when it's going to come, and you can't escape it because it's labor pains. We can try and mask it with drugs and stuff. I said we, but we as the collective community. So doctors and nurses and women in childbirth can try to mask it through and cover up some of the pain through drugs and different breathing techniques and stuff like that. But we all know that there's a lot of pain associated with it. And I'm not in no way trying to downplay this, so don't get me, don't send me letters saying, "Oh, he's just glancing over." No, like, it's a very serious thing, and it's a very important thing, and it's a beautiful thing. But childbirth and the pain that is associated with it is very real. And I think that the writer of 1 Thessalonians uses that because I would imagine, especially in that time where there wasn't the modern medicine that we have now to combat those pains and make it a little bit more predictable in the timeline. There's a lot of pain, and I would imagine there's a lot of women at the time who didn't survive childbirth or had a lot of complications with it. It says they can't escape it. So that means when Jesus comes and that destruction comes upon the world, they won't be able to escape it. So I ask again, are you ready? Is this something that you're ready for? Is the life you're living right now worthy of God's glory? Are you living a life that is showing God glory, or are you living for something outside of it? And that could be whether you're a believer or not a believer. I would challenge you to take a look and say, if Jesus were to come back today, tomorrow, a week from now, what's my life going to reflect? I use a lot of sports analogies in this because, I think mostly with sport and coaching, but there are a lot of sports with time limits and then other ones with point goals. Like basketball and football have time limits. Football has 15-minute quarters. Basketball has 12-minute quarters. And if you're talking about like international football or soccer, there are 45-minute halves. But then there are other sports like the sport I played, like volleyball or baseball, who have either point limits or inning limits, and you have a certain amount of leeway. You're not running against a clock. You're not competing against a clock. You're actually just competing against the other team. The benefit for both of those types of games is that you always get to know when the end is coming. You always kind of have a chance in a way. In the timed games, not as much, but you have at least a gauge of how it's going, and you know when basically the point of no return. You know that either the game's out of reach, or you still got time to make an impact. In the non-timed games like baseball, volleyball, softball, tennis, there's always a chance. But you know that once that last out is made or that last point is scored, that's the end. But what if all these games happen and the rule was at any moment the ref, the umpire, or whoever could just call the game, no matter what, and based off of effort, based off of goals, points, whatever, the game's just over, and you cannot argue with it. See, in life, we don't have the luxury of knowing when that time is going to be, when that end point is going to be. We don't know whether it's Jesus coming back at any time or if it's our actual life on this earth ending. The truth is, none of us know when that time will be. So we don't have the luxury of the games knowing, oh, we got 15 more minutes, or we have 3 more months, to live. Even those diagnoses, we still don't know. Stuff can happen. We could live longer. We could live shorter. We just don't have that luxury. So while we're in it, why not give everything we have for the glory of God? Let's not try and time out the best possible scenario, the best possible way of doing things. That doesn't mean we don't plan and we don't give our have a strategy on how to get things done. But we have to have the mindset, the heart, that we're going to do what we're doing for God. That brings me back to the anchor verse of this whole podcast, is Colossians 3:23. And I have it right here. It is, whatever you do, do your work heartily as for the Lord rather than for men. So anything that we do, let's do it for God. I'm going to go one verse further into that because it goes with today's topic. So Colossians 3:24, after it says in 23, whatever you do, do your work heartily as for the Lord rather than for men. 24 says, knowing that from the Lord you will receive the reward of the inheritance. It is the Lord Christ whom you serve. In the last 2 episodes, I've mentioned inheritance and being co-heirs with Christ. And so when we do our work for the Lord rather than for men, we know that we will receive the reward of inheritance. And it just kind of goes back to the question I asked earlier. Are you satisfied with just being on the team, or do you want more responsibility? Do you want a bigger reward? When we do things for God, we get it. He stores up those rewards, those treasures in heaven. Yes, we might get rewarded here on earth as well, but the main reward is in heaven when we're with Jesus, living in eternity for him and with him. So again, I challenge you. Let's go out this week and live a life that is ready for when Jesus comes back. And that might be in our lifetime. We might be that generation, or it might be thousands of years from now. But it could be anywhere in between as well. So we're to be ready. We're to be of sober mind, alert, ready for his coming. Doing the work of the kingdom for Jesus, to glorify him in everything we do. Thanks for listening this week. Again, hit us up. Love to pray for you. Love to pray with you. We'll see you soon. Let's get off the sidelines, stop making excuses, and get in the game. We'll see you next week.
Get in the game. Thank you for listening to the Get in the Game podcast. Please take a second to rate and review us on Apple Podcasts. That's the best way to support us. Find us on YouTube and subscribe for more content. If you would like for us to pray for you, or if you have topics that you would like us to tackle in upcoming episodes, email us at getinthegamepodcast@gmail.com. That's getinthegamepodcast@gmail.com. Or hit us up on Twitter and Instagram at getinthegamepc. If you've experienced getting off the sidelines and getting into the game yourself, please let us know. And remember, it's time to get in the game.